The past holds secrets and we're here to reveal them. Join us! Egyptian archaeologists have discovered the oldest known mummy ever found in the country. Yep, they were keeping it under wraps, literally and figuratively. This 4,300-year-old mummy was found in a group of tombs near the Step Pyramid of Djoser, which dates back to Egypt's Old Kingdom.
It was covered in layers of gold. The team also discovered several other tombs, including one belonging to an ancient Egyptian official and another to a secret guardian who was believed to perform special rituals.
Another fascinating find was the tomb of a scribe, which contained the largest statue ever uncovered in the area. This massive burial site also includes over a dozen pyramids and resting places. One of the most famous mummies in the world is that of Hatshepsut.
She ruled Egypt for about 20 years, building all kinds of amazing structures and opening new trade routes. But when archaeologist Howard Carter found her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, her coffin was empty.
Later, Carter found two coffins in a different tomb, one belonging to Hatshepsut's nurse and the other to an unknown woman.
In 2006, a team of experts decided to investigate whether this unknown woman was actually the queen herself. They found a tooth in a wooden box with Hatshepsut's name on it. When they compared the tooth to a gap in the mummy's mouth, it was a perfect match.
Then there's Ramses II, one of Egypt's most legendary rulers, but it's actually his mummy that made history.
You don't hear much about his father, though. Anyway, Ramses II is considered the greatest pharaoh of all time. He ruled for 60 years and lived past 90, which is pretty incredible given the era.
He reportedly had over 100 children. Talk about a big family. When he died, his body was originally buried in the Valley of the Kings, but after some tomb raiders tried to steal all the treasures, the priests secretly moved his body to keep it safe.
Fast forward to the 1800s, and Ramses's mummy was discovered along with those of other important rulers and officials. But it wasn't in great shape, so archaeologists flew it to Paris for preservation.
But here's the catch. They couldn't legally move him to another country without proper documents. The solution? They gave Ramses II his own passport, listing his profession as king, complete with a photo. Now, most mummies aren't exactly known for having great skin, but the ancient woman nicknamed the Lady of the Dyes is an exception.
No, not that kind of dye.
This wealthy woman from ancient times was found in an ornate tomb in 1971, and she looked incredible. Well, for a mummy. Thanks to the special conditions in her tomb, like the humidity and lack of oxygen, her body was almost perfectly preserved. Her skin was soft, her hair was in great shape, and she was still flexible.
The museum now proudly displays her mummy along with luxury items she was buried with, like fancy dinner clothes and musical instruments. Experts examined her more closely and found that she died of a heart attack around age 50. And that was over 2,000 years ago. The Lady of the Dyes is still making headlines.
And then there's Otzi, the Iceman, discovered in the Alps in 1991. At first, Austrian authorities thought he was a modern-day climber because his body was so well preserved.
But it turns out he was from the Copper Age. He was found over 10,000 feet above sea level. Studying his body has taught us so much about life in prehistoric Europe.
We now know he was from Central Europe, enjoyed eating meat, and suffered from things like arthritis, clogged arteries, and gut issues.
But he likely used acupuncture and herbal remedies to treat them. He was also really good with tools. He'd sharpened his just days before his untimely death. Who knows? Maybe he sensed something coming. Or maybe he was just getting ready for a regular day.
Finally, there's King Tut, probably the guy who made mummies famous.
He died young, at 19, over 3,000 years ago. But it's his tomb, discovered in 1922, that blew everyone away. Unlike other royal tombs, his was completely intact, filled with elaborate coffins, including ones made of solid gold.
His burial didn't just give us a glimpse into ancient Egyptian life. His DNA also helped identify his parents and showed he had a rare bone disorder that may have made it hard for him to walk. And then there's Ginger, probably one of the coolest mummies you'll ever hear about. He's like Ginger the Mummy and more ancient mysteries.
Ginger was discovered in Egypt and is believed to be the oldest naturally preserved body ever found, even older than the earliest examples of intentional mummification. Back then, people would bury the dead in shallow graves in the hot, dry desert sand. The sand would absorb all the moisture, which prevented bacteria from growing, so the body stayed preserved naturally.
Scientists still aren't sure whether Ginger was meant to be preserved on purpose. But since he was buried with some pottery, it's likely whoever buried him knew a bit about how to preserve bodies, even if they didn't understand the science behind it.
If you ever want to meet Ginger in person, he's currently on display at the British Museum, just chilling there.
A Dutch art collector once bought a statue from Asia, but got way more than he bargained for. The statue contained a hidden mummy inside.
Unfortunately, the body was so fragile that it couldn't be removed, so it had to stay inside the statue. The coolest part? The mummy is over 1,000 years old and was actually on display for 200 years before it was sealed inside the statue.
When scientists scanned it using a CT scan, they discovered that the mummy was filled with paper scrolls, yes, inside the body.
Experts think the person may have undergone a ritual known as self-mummification, a super intense process that involved a special diet and herbal teas that made the body less appealing to bacteria. Very few people could complete this process, and those who did were held in very high respect.
No Egyptian queen has baffled scientists and historians more than the stunning Nefertiti. Based on statues of her, she was known for her slender neck, wide eyes, and high cheekbones. Her name literally means, "The beautiful woman has come." Talk about living up to your name.
Although she was never a pharaoh, Nefertiti made a huge impact as queen and wife to Pharaoh Akhenaten. She was incredibly powerful, admired by many, but also made a lot of enemies. She was connected to King Tutankhamun, not by blood, but as his stepmother.
So far, no one's been able to identify her mother, but that might change soon. A local Egyptologist digging in the Valley of the Kings recently found 2 female mummies believed to be of Egyptian royalty. According to experts, one of them could actually be Nefertiti or her daughter.
If that turns out to be true, we're in for something big. Because DNA analysis and CT scans could give us the clearest, most detailed picture of the famous queen we've ever seen.
It's kind of wild to think we've only scratched the surface of what's buried beneath modern-day Egypt. Nefertiti ruled during a golden age in Egypt's history, but unfortunately died during a time of social unrest, which is why her tomb was likely lost. Now let's be honest. When you hear the word mummy, you might get chills down your spine. That's because most of us picture spooky monsters from horror movies.
But in reality, mummies have taught us so much about ancient civilizations, their leaders, and how people dealt with death and loss. The ancient Egyptians were probably the most famous for their mummies.
They believed in life after death, but only if certain conditions were met, like keeping the body preserved and burying it properly, often with food, tools, and furniture. Basically, they were giving the dead a fully furnished apartment for the afterlife.
Why did they believe this? Because they were closely connected to nature. They saw life as a cycle, the sun rising and setting, plants dying and growing again, and believed that a strong spirit, like Osiris, who represented death and rebirth, played a key role in the journey to the afterlife.
That's why mummification was such a big deal. They used things like honey, resin, and incense to preserve the body and prepare it for eternity. And of course, no mummy is more famous than King Tutankhamun or King Tut. He was a young pharaoh who ruled more than 3,000 years ago.
The issue with most ancient tombs is that they were looted long ago, since people knew how valuable the stuff inside was. King Tut's tomb, though, it was a miracle. When it was opened in 1922, people went wild. It was completely untouched. That's how well it had been hidden.
Inside his tomb, his body was wrapped in 3 coffins, including one made of pure gold. The items buried with him gave us an amazing glimpse into life in ancient Egypt, and studying his mummy also taught us a lot about the culture and health of that time.
We also learned a lot about King Tutankhamun's family by analyzing his DNA. Scientists discovered he had malaria and a foot condition that probably made it hard for him to walk.
Another famous pharaoh was Ramses II, who ruled Egypt for an incredible 68 years, a really long time for that era.
He was well known for his military campaigns and massive building projects, and many of the things built during his reign still exist today, including a huge statue of him. Ramses II was about 6 feet tall and lived to be around 90 years old, which is pretty impressive.
After examining his mummy, scientists believe he may have had a spinal condition that affected his posture.
Remember those tomb robbers we mentioned earlier? They might be the reason why Ramses II ended up buried in a simple coffin in a hidden collection of royal mummies at Deir el-Bahari, which was rediscovered in 1881. Luckily, archaeologists were able to identify him because his name was written on the wrappings.
Mummification in ancient Egypt was a big deal. The process took an incredible 70 days. It was very precise and ceremonial. The person preparing the body had to say special prayers and handle everything carefully. They used a kind of salt called natron to dry the body, then wrapped it in linen and resin to make it look more lifelike. The tomb was just as important as the mummy itself.
Take King Tut's tomb, for example. Its walls were beautifully decorated with detailed artwork showing his journey to the afterlife, from his funeral procession to his passage through the underworld. The ancient Egyptians believed everyone took this journey after death, so they filled their tombs with items and paintings to help them on their spiritual path. The tomb walls were also covered in spells from a special book filled with poems, which the Egyptians believed would help people reach the afterlife. That's how seriously they took this whole journey. These included things like linen tunics, scarves, gloves and head coverings, plus tons of gold jewellery with gems. Bracelets, buckles, pendants, necklaces, rings, and even beetle-shaped charms for protection. They also included things like fans made from ivory and ostrich feathers to keep cool. Some even buried themselves with boats. For instance, Pharaoh Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, had a giant ship buried nearby. As for King Tut, he didn't have a real boat in his tomb, but he did have several oars, plus 3 chariots and many staffs made from precious materials, possibly suggesting that he preferred land travel in the afterlife. One of the coolest things found in ancient tombs were bottles of oils and perfumes. I mean, if a king was going to look fancy, why not smell nice too, right? They even placed food and drinks in the tombs. In King Tut's case, archaeologists found 36 jars of ancient drinks and baskets of dried fruit, all meant to help him on his journey to the afterlife. Because they thought the trip to the next world would take a long time, they left behind a lot of supplies, like food and water, to support their loved ones. Pharaohs also packed up with fancy clothes and beautiful jewellery for a stylish trip to the afterlife.
They even found some ancient board games, often made of gold or ivory. One popular game was called Senet. It was super common in ancient Egypt and kind of like a mix between chess and backgammon.
Now, while the Egyptians may have the most famous mummies, they weren't actually the first to come up with the idea.
That credit goes to an ancient civilization in South America called the Chinchorro. As far as we know, they were the first people ever to mummify their dead, starting about 2,000 years before the Egyptians began their own mummification rituals.
We've learned a lot about ancient rulers by studying mummies, but until recently, we had no real idea what they actually looked like when they were alive.
That changed when archaeologists discovered some very special mummy portraits, highly detailed paintings of individuals that were made while they were still alive.
These portraits were usually painted on wood, not canvas like modern art, and they're known for being realistic and beautiful.
Researchers even used them to diagnose diseases by comparing the portraits to the mummified remains.
Some portraits even showed jewellery that was later found on the mummies themselves.
The recent discovery of these mummy portraits in central Egypt is a big deal. It's the first time in over 100 years that such portraits have been found. Mummies have appeared all over the world naturally, not just in Egypt.
In some cases, natural conditions like extreme cold, intense heat, low oxygen, or even accidental exposure to certain chemicals can cause a body to become mummified without any human involvement.
These conditions stop bacteria from growing, which helps preserve the body.
One of the most famous naturally preserved mummies is Otzi the Iceman. He was a man who lived about 5,000 years ago in Europe.
When his body was discovered in the Alps in 1991, Austrian authorities at first thought he was a modern-day mountain climber because he was so well preserved.
But once scientists studied him, they realized he was actually from the Copper Age.
There are countless doors around the world that haven't been opened in decades or even centuries.
So why does it seem like we can open any door we want these days?
The truth is, some of these doors have been kept shut for serious reasons, and to this day, no one really knows what treasures or secrets they might be hiding.
Here are 4 mysterious doors that still keep their secrets.
1. The Taj Mahal in India. The Taj Mahal is one of the most romantic places in the world.
It was built in 1631 by Emperor Shah Jahan as a gift to his third wife, whom he deeply loved. They were married for 19 years and had 14 children together, but sadly she died while giving birth to their last child. Heartbroken, Shah Jahan decided to build a legendary tomb in her memory, a project that took 20 full years to complete.
The Taj Mahal has a very unique design, with 4 massive minarets, each 130 feet tall, standing at the corners of a huge platform.
These towers weren't just for decoration. Back in the 17th century, engineers worried about buildings collapsing under their own weight, so the chief architect deliberately built the minarets slightly tilted outward to make sure that if they ever fell, they wouldn't crash into the main structure.
Now here's the mysterious part. There are sealed rooms all over the Taj Mahal that no one is allowed to enter.
If you look at photos of the building from across the river, you can even see 2 sealed chambers, but nobody knows what's inside or why they've been locked since Shah Jahan's time. Some researchers believe those rooms were built with marble that turns into calcium carbonate when exposed to carbon dioxide, causing the stone to flake and break apart.
To make matters worse, there's no airflow in those rooms, so if carbon dioxide builds up, it could cause the minarets to weaken and collapse.
But wait, there's more. Some people think Shah Jahan's wife's body is still inside one of those hidden rooms, perfectly preserved. Could be true. Who knows what those mysterious chambers are really hiding?
2. The Great Sphinx of Giza in Egypt. The Great Sphinx is surrounded by mystery.
It's not just the largest stone statue in the world. It's also a mythical creature with a woman's head and a lion's body, rooted in both Egyptian and Greek mythology. The Sphinx is incredibly ancient. It's thought to be around 4,500 years old.
It took around 3 years and 100 workers who were not slaves to carve this massive statue. In fact, they were well fed with meals like goat and lamb.
The Sphinx is also believed to have originally been much bigger than it looks today. Archaeologists found massive blocks of stone and abandoned tools around the area, hinting at the scale of the original structure.
But the real mystery lies beneath the Sphinx, specifically under its paws.
Scientists using seismic equipment discovered 2 hidden chambers underground. Some believe these could be the legendary Hall of Records, said to contain ancient scrolls and knowledge about the universe. That's cooler than any library I've ever seen.
There are even wild theories that the Egyptians knew about Atlantis, and that the proof is hidden in those chambers, basically an ancient version of a conspiracy theory.
Sadly, we can't just go explore. The site is off limits.
3. Padmanabhaswamy Temple in Kerala, India.
Located in the beautiful state of Kerala, this temple is famous not just for its stunning design, but for the secrets buried beneath it. Underneath the temple are 6 underground chambers labelled creatively as Vaults A3F. The massive iron doors guarding them only add to the mystery.
A few years ago, authorities decided to open some of the vaults, but it was not an easy task. You can't just swing the doors open and walk in. It took a lot of effort, and after all that, they discovered almost nothing. Some of the chambers were basically empty, or at least held nothing remarkable.
But one vault, Vault B, is still completely sealed, and no one has ever opened it. Some believe it's protected by a curse, while others think it holds incredible treasures or ancient secrets.
Finally, in 2011, 5 out of the 6 vaults under the Padmanabhaswamy Temple were opened. And guess what they found? Tons of treasure bags filled with gold, precious gems, and priceless diamond jewelry. The total value of what was discovered is estimated to be over $1 trillion. It's like the temple was the real-life inspiration for Aladdin's Cave of Wonders.
But hold on. We said 5 out of 6. What about the last vault? That one's still sealed. And not for lack of trying. They simply couldn't open it. Some believe it's deadly cursed. According to legend, only a saint or wise man who knows a special chant can safely break the curse. But no one's been able to do it yet. Maybe because we're a little short on saints these days.
There's also a rumour that back in the 1930s some treasure hunters tried to break into Vault B to loot it. But before they could get in, giant snakes supposedly came out of nowhere and scared them off. Of course, that sounds like an urban legend. There's no real evidence it ever happened.
Interestingly, the temple's official auditor claimed that Vault B has actually been opened at least 7 times since 1990, and nothing bad happened to anyone who went in. Who knows? Maybe we should send Indiana Jones to check it out.
Deep under an unexplored hill, surrounded by deadly traps, lies a 2,000-year-old tomb believed to belong to Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. He was born in the state of Qin and became king when he was still a boy. As he grew older and gained more power, he conquered all the warring states and unified them under one rule, thus creating the Qin dynasty.
When he died in 210 BCE, he was buried in a massive underground tomb. And when I say massive, I mean gigantic. In 1974, some farmers near Xi'an were digging a well when they stumbled upon something strange, a life-sized clay soldier. That discovery led to one of the biggest archaeological digs ever, which has been going on for over 40 years.
So far, they've unearthed thousands of unique terracotta warriors, each with distinct features, from hairstyles to facial expressions. Experts estimate there could be as many as 8,000, but only about 2,000 have been uncovered so far.
Here's the wild part. The main burial chamber, which supposedly contains the emperor himself, is still sealed. Ancient records describe an enormous underground city built for the emperor, complete with towers, palaces, and incredible decorations. The historian Sima Qian wrote that the tomb was filled with treasures and room for hundreds of officials.
One reason archaeologists haven't opened it is the lack of technology to explore it safely. Another is the liquid mercury. According to old texts, the tomb was filled with rivers of mercury to represent China's major rivers, the Yellow River and the Yangtze. Back then, people believed mercury could give eternal life, although ironically, it may have killed the emperor since he reportedly took mercury pills to try to extend his life.
So far, soil tests around the tomb showed dangerous mercury pollution, and that's why scientists are still hesitant to open it. It could be too risky for both people and the environment. If I had to pick one door to open, I'd probably skip the one leading to a tomb filled with toxic mercury. Call me crazy, but I like to avoid potential death traps.
Unlike many other ancient Egyptian tombs, King Tutankhamun's burial site remained untouched by looters for 3,000 years. One reason was that the tomb was smaller than usual and hidden in a place called the Valley of the Kings. By the time explorers got close, the entrance was already covered by debris from the construction of a nearby tomb, which probably helped keep it a secret. There were also no markings or signs on the outside to give it away.
Over time, nature helped preserve the tomb until the 1920s, when a man named Howard Carter finally broke through. Now, Carter is often hailed as a hero, but recent research suggests he might have been a bit more cunning than people originally thought.
He wasn't just a glorified treasure hunter. He was a real archaeologist, and long before finding Tut, he was on a relentless mission to uncover Egyptian artifacts. He had a genuine passion for the ancient world.
Subscribe and explore the forgotten past with us. Like